In 2004, I used one of these to break the rules of traditional French cooking and change how we made stock at the 3 Michelin-starred Fat Duck restaurant. A year later, we were voted best restaurant in the world. A coincidence? Obviously. But you can use the same technique to beat the box and make 2 quarts of amazing roast chicken stock in under 60 minutes for only $6. That can make your cooking the best in your neighborhood. And I'll bring some data to answer a question about whether a long, slow simmer is worth it. And as a bonus, I'll share the technique we used at the Fat Duck to make a consommé as clear as whiskey. And the technique couldn't be easier. Let's go shopping. By starting with a Costco rotisserie chicken. At $5, it's a time-saving bargain. You'll also need half an onion, half a carrot, a couple cloves of garlic, and 2 quarts of water that I'm gonna bring to a boil now because I've gotta save time if I'm gonna turn these into a roast chicken stock worthy of a 3 Michelin star kitchen in only 60 minutes. Let's get going. I'm using chicken fat that I've skimmed from past batches of stock, but you can use any neutral oil. While the oil heats, peel and thinly slice half a carrot. Do the same with half an onion, smash a couple cloves of garlic, and then get these into the hot oil so they can sweat and get a bit of color while I prep the chicken. Story time. Back in 2003, I bailed on pursuing a PhD after burning out on too much chemistry and math. I needed a job, so through a bunch of dumb luck, I ended up spending 5 years cooking for Heston Blumenthal at the Fat Duck restaurant in the UK. I started about a year before we won our 3rd Michelin star and were voted best restaurant in the world. Behind the scenes, the Duck was a struggling 2-star, and as a result, staff lunch was a study in frugality. The leftover meat from stock making was often served as part of our staff lunch. It was not delicious, but it did taste like meat, and that set off alarm bells in my head as a waste of flavor and money that we could have been extracting. So I started experimenting with how to get more from less. Now, you might not have heard of Fick's law of diffusion, but if you've ever brewed a cup of coffee, you understand it intuitively. You wouldn't brew a whole coffee bean. It would be a flavorless cup of hot water. So you grind it into smaller pieces, which increases the surface area for extracting flavor. As you keep grinding the pieces finer, the surface area keeps increasing. But since the volume of the bean hasn't changed, the ratio of surface area to volume grows larger, and the flavorful molecules that you want in your cup have less distance to travel to escape into the water. That's what Fick's law says. The rate of extraction improves as the ratio of surface area to volume grows, simply because what's diffusing doesn't have to travel as far. And suddenly, a few beans can make a delicious cup of strong coffee. The same is true of stock making. Fewer ingredients made smaller can give you a better stock faster. Which is why I'm stripping the meat off the carcass and shredding it to remove the diffusion barrier. And yes, I'm using all the meat. I think great stock should taste like meat, not bones. At the Fat Duck, our stocks were heavy on meat and light on bones because that gave us a stock that was much closer to those roasting juices that Heston loved. Now, into the pot this goes. And now that my water's at a boil, I'll add that too before I seal things up with the lid and bring my Instapot up to pressure. I cannot begin to explain what heresy everything I've just done was in 2003. Back then, stock making still followed classical French rules, going back to Escoffier, who was obsessed with the flavor and clarity of his stocks. He called for whole carcasses of birds, large pieces of meat and vegetables, for rich stocks that would be simmered for 8 hours or more. His concern was that smaller pieces would break down too quickly into fine particles that would cloud the stock, making it taste muddy or even bitter. But when Heston Blumenthal tasted what's going to come out of this pot, he ended up buying an industrial pressure cooker, and we reworked all our meat stock recipes to use half the ingredients and cook them 4 times faster. Because inside this pot, something remarkable is about to happen. As the water returns to a boil, the steam pressure in the pot builds until it pushes the valve closed, and the boiling stops instantly. Why? Because boiling happens when evaporating water pushes up with more pressure than the atmosphere above it pushes down. Now that the pot is sealed closed, the more the water tries to boil, the more steam builds above the water and pushes back down to keep it from reaching a boil. As long as this balance exists, the liquid inside the pressure cooker is dead calm, which is why our stock will come out clear. It's the turbulent churning action of boiling that breaks up bits of food and emulsifies droplets of oil into a stock that make it cloudy. And the water can get much hotter than the normal boiling point, up to 250 degrees instead of 212. That might not seem like a lot, but the extraction of flavor and good stuff like collagen that's turned into gelatin are exponentially sensitive to temperature. Increase the temperature a little bit and things go a lot faster. For pressure cooking, a good approximation is that for every 10 degrees Fahrenheit that you increase the temperature, the stock develops about 45% faster. So by raising the boiling point up to 250 degrees, a great stock can be made around 4 times faster. For those of you with some knowledge of physical chemistry, all of this follows from the Arrhenius equation. That's the theory, but how do I actually know this? I measured it, because if there's one rule I live by, it's that you can't improve what you don't measure, which is why I built the predictive thermometer with my team at Combustion Inc. Unlike other wireless thermometers, it has 8 sensors along the full length of the probe. It lets you see inside the cooking process in a way no other tool can. Why does this matter? Say you're cooking a beef Wellington. You need to make sure the pastry is fully cooked without overcooking the tenderloin beneath the mushroom duxelle. The 8 sensors let you see exactly what is happening in every layer. Or maybe you want to develop the perfect timing for a chocolate souffle. It finds the true core of the souffle so that I can dial in the perfect timing for the perfect rise. Now, back to how I figured out the optimal cooking time for stock. I created 2 identical stocks and simmered one and pressure cooked the other. Every hour, for 12 hours, I pulled a small sample and spun it in my countertop centrifuge to separate out any solids and fat that I'd accidentally grabbed from the stock. Then I used a refractometer to measure the concentration of what had dissolved into the water. The data is pretty cool. In just 1 hour of pressure cooking, I've extracted more than 6 hours of stovetop simmering. And in 2 hours of pressure cooking, I've achieved more than 9 hours of simmering. But the really interesting thing is what happens when you try to fit a diffusion equation to these data. A single diffusion process doesn't fit. It takes 2 terms to make the math fit reality. That tells us there are 2 different processes happening at the same time when making stock. First is the fast step. This is where the easy-to-get stuff are washed out of the shredded meat fibers. These are molecules like natural meat sugars, salts, proteins, peptides, and the fats that give stock most of its flavor. Then there's the slow step, where collagen is extracted from the meat, skin, and bones and split into gelatin, while proteoglycans are extracted from cartilage. These are big, bushy molecules that get tangled up and give stock its rich body and silky mouthfeel that make it the foundation of classical sauces. Developing a stock to this point takes hours at a simmer on the stovetop, but the magic of a pressure cooker is you can do this in under an hour. But why not more? I mean, the line of extraction for a pressure cooker just keeps going up. Why not let it go for 8 hours or more for maximum body and flavor? Because it's disgusting. I didn't just sample the stocks every hour, I also tasted them. As the pressure cooker went beyond 3 hours, it started to get a noticeable metallic taste as the structure of the bone completely broke down and dumped excessive amounts of minerals like calcium and magnesium into the stock. And as time went on, it also became bitter as proteins in the stock started breaking into short peptide fragments. Not only did this taste awful, it also damages the stock in another way. This is what the 1 hour stock looks like when it's chilled down and the gelatin sets. And this is what it looks like from a stock that's been pressure cooked from 12 hours. What a mess. Imagine gelatin like long tangled ropes. When you cool them, they snag on each other to form a mesh that traps water so that it can't flow freely. That's a gel. But if you cook it too long at high pressure, you chop those ropes into tiny pieces that can't get tangled up and form a mesh that gels. So where's the sweet spot? To my palate, it's between 30 minutes and 3 hours. For something like chicken stock, I'd buy a shorter, 30 to 90 minutes, because the collagen is easy to extract. But if you're making beef stock, I'd push it longer, maybe 2 hours, because beef collagen is tougher and takes longer to dissolve and unwind into gelatin. And for other animals, it's somewhere in between. But for this stock, the timer has just hit the 40-minute mark and it's time to start cooling it down.
Now, one does not simply flip the valve open
and release the pressure quickly. The superheated water inside will flash to a boil and churn up all the fat and small particles, clouding the stock. Instead, wait for it to cool down, or if you're in a rush like me, release the pressure slowly, which also will use up the time remaining on this clock. Time's up. Let's see how this looks and tastes. Ooh, intense. This needs a minute for the most potent volatiles to blow off, but smells like roast chicken. Moment of truth. That is delicious. It is meaty, caramelized, unctuous. It is the essence of roast chicken, and it is way better than this stuff. And look at the yield. I put in 2 quarts of water, but I got back more than 2 quarts of stock because we extracted all of the juice from the meat. Now, for pan sauces, soups, risottos, this is perfect. It is every bit as good as the roast chicken stock we used at the Fat Duck. And you could stop right here. But it is possible to refine this into something even better, something you almost never see anymore. I'm talking about consommé. In classical French cuisine, a crystal clear consommé was the ultimate test of a saucier's skill. But the traditional method is a real pain. You have to puree meat, vegetables, egg white, then whisk this into the stock, simmer gently for an hour to form a raft, and pray you don't break it apart as you carefully ladle out the clarified liquid beneath it. It's delicious and also incredibly tedious. But we don't do tedious. We do fast and efficient by making the smoothie from hell with some of the stock, some raw chicken, my blender, and violence. By obliterating the meat, we're releasing myosin, a sticky muscle protein that works just like the albumin in egg whites. We are also whipping in thousands of tiny air bubbles, and this is crucial for later. Pour it back in, bring it to high pressure, and then turn off the heat and let it cool naturally. As the stock heats back up, all that raw myosin denatures, uncoiling into sticky strings that act like a net that grab all the oil droplets and particles clouding the stock. And because of those air bubbles we whipped in, as the proteins keep coagulating, it grabs those air bubbles, forming a buoyant raft that floats to the surface, scrubbing the stock as it rises. When you open it up, the raft is solid. It has captured everything. Unlike the delicate French version, you don't have to be gentle. You can pour it right through a sieve and even squeeze the raft to get every drop of flavor out. The result is spectacular. Garnish it with some fine brunoise vegetables and you have consommé brunoise. It might irritate the traditionalists, but tasting this, I think Escoffier would approve. But believe it or not, there's an even better way. The Fat Duck didn't earn its 3 Michelin stars by magic. It happened because of Heston's relentless pursuit of making things a bit better. He was constantly questioning assumptions, testing techniques, and compounding small improvements across the entire menu. He admired that same relentless drive in the legendary chef Alain Chapelle, and we served a dish as an homage to him, a jelly of quail and crayfish cream. Making it flawless mattered. This dish was delicious, but the quail jelly became cloudy when it was chilled and set into a delicate gel. And this frustrated Heston incredibly, so much so that when this was on my section, he challenged me to make it better. Still good. I spent months trying to brute force a solution. I tried fining strategies borrowed from winemaking. I used centrifuges. I even vacuum filtered the consommé through a 0.2 micron membrane filter that Heston had gotten a hold of. The filters clogged after about a cup of liquid, and at $30 a pop, it was unsustainably expensive. And it didn't really make a difference, because once you chilled the consommé, minuscule droplets of oil clumped together and solidified as opaque droplets of fat that made the consommé cloudy. Even after filtering to sub-micron levels, that perfect clarity fell apart once the consommé gelled. The breakthrough came through pure serendipity. I was on a trip with Heston, and we were having lunch with Albert Adria of El Bui and a German scientist named Gerd Klock, who is an expert in the physics and chemistry of gels. Heston was describing the problem when Gerd basically asked, "Why are you fighting the stock?" And then he described a method that would let the stock clarify itself. You just freeze the stock into ice cubes, then let them slowly thaw in a strainer in the fridge and walk away. Imagine the gelatin inside that frozen stock as a microscopic net. When the stock froze, expanding ice crystals stretched and strained the gelatin mesh. Now, as the block slowly thaws in the fridge, the melt ice carries molecules that are the essence of stock out through holes in the stretched mesh. And because it's ice cold, the fat droplets remain solid, unable to flow and cloud the consommé. Meanwhile, those large, hazy proteins are simply too big to fit through the mesh. The gelatin acts like a net that refuses to let go of the gunk and also refuses to let go of some of the water. So, drip by drip, what falls is crystal clear and twice as concentrated as the original stock. Usually, to get this intensity, you have to boil the stock down, sending the best aromas into the air. But here, we lose nothing. It is just the pure, intense essence of roast chicken. There's no waste either. What's left is basically a demi-glace. Save that for your sauces. Now, because we filtered out the gelatin, this consommé won't set. So if you want a jelly, you need to add some purified gelatin back in, 0.5% to 1% by weight. But for me, this pressure-cooked and ice-filtered roast chicken consommé is so pure and so intense that it just needs a little bit of seasoning, then bottle it up.
Yoi! Stop!
For relaxing times, make it Pappy Van Kluckel's time.
Cutto, 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 cutto!